Alright friends, thank you for joining me here for another video at Savior of the Second. My name is Adam. I go by Coach Hardgains because that's the name of my coaching platform. I've been coaching bodybuilders, current and recovering drug addicts, as well as mentoring troubled youth for over 20 years. That makes me feel old. I've also been teaching intros to self-defense, meaning different forms: grappling, boxing, firearm safety. Nothing too advanced. I'm not an advanced firearms instructor, but I have been studying progressive fighting systems most of my life. If you are familiar with PFS, it is a system of martial arts and fighting styles made up of Jeet Kune Do concepts and then Gracie JuJu. And you'll remember the name Gracie by early on in the UFC and MMA and mixed martial arts. The Gracie family came out as like the big fighters. And so today I kind of wanted to go through a little story time and share a little bit about who I am and give you guys a little bit more information about me. I figured a good way to start that would be the first time that I was ever choked out, and it was by a Gracie. So stick around. We'll get into it. Alright, so I grew up in Trenton, New Jersey as a young child. My parents divorced by the time I was 1, meaning my biological mother and my biological father. I was then raised by my biological mother, and she provided me with a godparent, a godfather, as many of us were back then, back in the old days. And my godfather was happened to be like one of her close friends. He ended up basically becoming my father figure immediately. And then eventually, in my early 20s, adopted me officially and legally, and he has been my father and the best father I could ever ask for, and the best grandfather I could ever ask for, my whole life, and my kids' whole lives. Now, if you don't know much about New Jersey, and especially about Trenton, you know that it's not a good area, and we didn't last very long there because my mother moved us out and to another area called Heightstown, which really wasn't that much better. But she continued to try to give me a better life, avoiding the inner city and avoiding the violence and other things that came along with that. Now, on weekends, I would go to my biological father's. I could never avoid violence there anyway, so, what was the point? But I went from being the only white kid at home with my mom to being the only white kid with the only black friends in a white trash trailer park with my dad. And everywhere I went, somebody wanted to pick a fight with me. And we're talking early on, as early as the 3rd grade. So my first fight that actually occurred was when I was jumped for the first time in the 3rd grade by 3 other kids. Now that's not today's story time. That's for another time. Today's story time is eventually my adopted father, my godfather at the time, who was very into martial arts, very into self-defense, and he had been practicing martial arts, lifting weights, boxing for, most of his life, of course. So he decides to become a PFS instructor so that he can teach me. Because one day, he comes to pick me up to hang out. He would come pick me up on Wednesday nights and take me to dinner and give me life lessons. And I'll never forget these lessons. They've formed who I am. And they've also formed the father that I am grateful to be and how I raise my children. Now one night he comes, picks me up for dinner, and I don't know if I had a black eye or a bruised cheek or, a bloody nose or something. I had something. I think I just had a bruised cheek from getting popped. And he asked me what happened, and I told him, some kids were picking on me and bullying me, and it was a bunch of them, and it was only me, because that's typically how it would be back then. And I don't know if that was the reason, or if he just was planning on becoming a progressive fighting systems instructor anyway. But PFS, progressive fighting systems, is also what is taught to our Navy SEALs, or it was at one point, and pretty much led by Paul Vunak. And I am so grateful that I was able to attend many seminars with my father for instructors, like instructor seminars, with Paul Vunak there, and at times, different members of the Gracie family. One seminar in particular, my father took me to, I want to say I was maybe 10, 11, 12, right there. And for this seminar, there's quite a bit of people there. We're all encircled around Paul Vunak, and he's teaching everybody, talking about. I specifically remember at that point he was talking about grabbing the armpit, right? And a lot of tactics through PFS are elbows, knees, bites, grabs, palm strikes, lots of different tactics that are used to disable a threat immediately, very quickly. And then he got into chokeholds, right? And it was either Hickson or Hoyce Gracie that was at this seminar. And my father and I can't remember. But one of them were there. And Paul says, okay, well, can we get a volunteer from the audience? We're gonna introduce you to a specific chokehold, right? And I remember my dad kind of just like pushes me, nudges me out into the open area of the circle. And Paul goes, perfect. Looks at me and he says, all right, get over here, kid. Most of them are adults, and here I am, this tiny little scrawny kid. I was scrawny. I graduated high school at 17 at 123 pounds at 5'10". And I get into and then I go into the middle towards Paul and one of the Gracies, Hickson or Hoyce again. And then immediately he throws me into this chokehold, wraps me, and then pluck in a second. I don't even remember, like, in a second. And he choked me out. Showed this chokehold to everybody. And they know what they're doing. They're professionals, so it's not like, I'm going to lay there, dying, choking out. But he put me into this hold, dropped me, and I remember coming to, and I was just like, I don't even know what happened. And that was the first time I was ever choked out. And I knew what it would feel like. I knew what to expect. And I've only ever been choked out one time in a fight, in an actual fight. And that was with someone who was a very skilled martial artist. And I remember this kid was a total bully. He was very good. And he always had an entourage with him. And so it's almost like they planned things out. Like, when I was in high school, they jumped me. It was like 4 of them. And it's like 2 of them would come behind you. One of them would face you, come at you. And they did this to a lot of people, and this was their way of bullying, and it was terrible. But then he would come out, and, in high school, not many kids are skilled at fighting or boxing or taking martial arts. Maybe you got some wrestlers, etc. Not many people can grapple. And he comes at me, and I'm distracted at the time. And, I think that what it is like the movies. You can actually remember your moves and the sequences and the things that happen the more you understand what you're doing, what is coming at you, how you're going to then respond, what the threat is. And so I remember specifically, what this kid did to me one time, and he choked me out. He got me from the side, and his friend was over here, and I got distracted. I looked over here, and he grabbed me by my shirt, pulled me into a chokehold, and just clocked me out. And that was cowardly, obviously very cowardly. And I definitely took care of that next time, and that never happened again. And in fact, with him, there were quite a few issues with him bullying other people at the time. I was like a sophomore, junior in high school, so I don't know, 15, 16, And, it's a shame because this is one of the reasons why I'm so anti-bullying and why I teach self-defense and why I work with troubled youth and why I'm just... If I ever found out that one of my kids was bullying other people or someone, oh boy, that's it. They would never... That's it. Thank God above, I have amazing kids. I'm a father of 6. And, I've never had a problem with my kids ever being bullied. In fact, I've always received accolades and praise from the teachers and principals of my kids' schools about, what kind of leaders they are, and I'm very proud of them. I really am very proud of my kids. But so, I'm very anti-bullying. Very, very anti-bullying. And that was the first time I was choked out. Very grateful for it. And I'll never forget it. Even, I'm 44 now, so all these years later, 30 years later, I'll never forget that moment. I thank, I thank Paul and whichever Gracie it was there that actually choked me out. But it was a great experience. Grateful for it. Made me who I am. Taught me a lot. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. There's your story time for today. The First time I was ever choked out. Stick around. Got a lot of stories to tell you. A lot of them are really good. Definitely not all of them are appropriate for anyone under the age of 18. So I should probably disclaimer that in the beginning. All right, guys. Catch you next video.
Let's deal with the valley, the hills again.